Talk Nelson Radio. It's the Talk of Nelson. Sport. The Mako Rugby Roundup.
Welcome to episode 16 of the Mako Rugby Roundup, where we find out who the fanatics are when it comes to all things rugby in the top of the South. I'm Chris Butler, and with me, my co-host, Mr. Rugby himself, Les Edwards. Good to have you back, mate.
Yes, wonderful to be here. Very chilly nights, but a beautiful day.
Yeah, that's right. It's we've got this cold snap, which hopefully is the last one we'll get before the summer comes along. But yeah, some beautiful days we're having, that's for sure. On today's show, we're going to be pretty much wrapping up the season, aren't we, with the Tasman Mako. We also have a very special guest, Mako assistant coach James Marshall. And also big news on the All Black front for little old Nelson, so that we've got some exciting news. But first of all, the Tasman Mako men. I was talking to a Hawke's Bay man last night who lives in our beautiful region, is loving it here. He said, but no matter how hard I try, I can't get the black and white hoops out of my system. I still shout at the TV at them, and was pretty chuffed with a good win by Hawke's Bay.
Yeah, I think they can be very proud of their season. To beat us 25-17 in Napier in pretty bleak conditions was a good win for them, and of course it consolidated a playoff spot, and that was what was up for grabs. So it was a deadly serious game. The winner was going to make playoffs, and the loser was going to have to depend on other teams getting them in. And that's how it panned out for Hawke's Bay. They made fourth spot in their pool. We unfortunately came fifth in ours. We were hoping that Northland might tip, Manawatu might tip over Northland, but it didn't happen. So, this is the first time outside the playoffs for, I think it's 11 years, so it's something we're not quite used to. But, look, an interesting season which we must talk about.
Yeah, so 25-17 to Hawke's Bay, and I felt that we were just starting to hit our strap. So what were your thoughts on that game, Les? We didn't play our best footy.
Well, it was a poor start. They kicked off and we dropped the ball and they scored a try, and then next minute they're 12-0 up. With a final score of 25-17, we've played very well thereafter, but that's been a bit of a hallmark with our teams, that we've not had the best of starts, and it was the case. So, the weather was just atrocious though, and we turned around with it behind, if you like, the breeze and the rain behind our backs in the second half, and we performed better. But look, hats off to Hawke's Bay. I thought that they might drop their lip having lost the Ramphilly Shield. We talked about that last week, Chris. But they stuck to their guns and put on a good performance.
Yeah, they're a tough team, aren't they? And we've always had good battles against them. So we wish them all the best in the finals, and we've just got to lick our wounds a bit and just write the season off to, well, a bit of rebuilding, bit of bad luck, but let's look at one or two of the reasons perhaps why it didn't fire this season. Victims of our success, we've talked about it. The coaches always play that down, and they always talk about, well, it means opportunities for other players. But 7 All Blacks out of the squad, including Ethan Blackadder, who was injured all season.
Yeah, so plus Ethan Blackadder, so that made a total of eight quality rugby players who weren't in the, they're part of the contracted squad of 33, so you've lost 8 there immediately. I agree, we are victims of our own success. We love having All Blacks. And the other thing that really hurt was permanent season-ending injuries that saw Pari Parkinson, Isi Tuangafasi and Mitchell Hunt not getting any game time. So there's another 3. There's 11 of your 33 missing. And then there were just injuries all the time. At one point there, we didn't have Mitch Hunt, our co-captain, on the park, and at some stage we lost Quinton Strange. So Andrew Makaleo had to take over the captaincy. One game we played without any contracted locks. It was just one of those dreadful seasons, injury-wise. But what came out of it, though, as coaches do say, it gives other younger players a real chance to shine, and we had a few of those.
Yeah, that's right. Some fantastic young talent that came out. You know them better than me, Les, but I was very, very impressed with a few of them, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely, and you'd be impressed with the ones I were. You know, when Luke Wrench was on the park, I think he's a very promising prop forward, very young. Max Hicks, he played lock for a bit, but, he's developing very well as a number 6. Anton Segner, when he played at 7, was awesome, but he then got injured and got replaced by a young man called Fletcher Anderson, who was outstanding.
Yeah, that's right.
And in the backs, I think Noah Hotham, Mako Springer, Tane Robinson, these sorts of guys with that experience under their belt, they're going to kick on.
Well, Hotham, I mean, isn't he a talent? The Sky commentators were talking about him, and Springer on the wing, local born and bred, and such a good talent. So, I guess that's what we're looking for, and every team does go through this. Even the top sides go through a bad season occasionally, but that generally means you've got to rebuild, and maybe it's timely, maybe you just can't be at the top all the time. It's very difficult to do that, that's just opened up the door for some great new talent to come through, and they'll build on that.
Yeah, so I do know the coaches and the players had their reviews over this week. And there would be some very honest conversations about what needs to be done and, what needs to happen in terms of especially Super Rugby players coming back for the season.
Yeah.
They've got to come back wanting to play. They've got to come back in shape. So they're the leaders, they're the experienced players, and then the young guys feed off their enthusiasm. So I think that would have been part of the conversation, just making sure that the Super guys know that although it's an end-of-season campaign, it's still 12 weeks are critically important to the region and to our fans.
Yeah, well, that's right. Exactly right. So also some Mako team awards were handed out.
Yeah, we had the awards a week or so ago, but there were community rugby awards, and we'll talk more about these next week, but in terms of the player awards, we have a Mako Man and a Mako Woman award, and these are really important because they're actually voted on by the players. So these players are judged by their peers to be, really good teammates. So for the Mako Woman, that went to our 30-game number 6, Tamara Silcock. And for the Mako men, Alex Nankerville, the midfielder, was named as Mako man, and I think he was just one of our absolutely outstanding rugby players all season. And his attitude off the field was really good as well. So he had a marvellous campaign. And then the other big awards are Player of the Year, which are actually selected by the coaches and team management. So this is where, the coaches with their critical eye actually decide who their best players are. And for the women, it was Cassie Siatunga, the wonderful number 10 that we had, who came into the region and really helped us run the team with, experience and calmness. She was wonderful. Yeah. Great decision. And for the men, the coaches went for Levi Armour, who was an absolute blockbuster all season. He came to the province and he was fit and he was hungry and he played so well. I'm not going to be surprised if he isn't named in the All Black 15 as a midfielder.
Wow.
As that secondary tour that's going to go over to the north, coached by Leon McDonald.
Yeah.
Levi and Alex to me were our standout players. Our midfield was just terrific. So I'm hoping that one or both of those young men will get a black jersey tour.
You're with the Mako Rugby Roundup, and our Mako guest today is James Marshall, aka Jimmy, Mako number 57, and the current Tasman Mako assistant coach. Welcome to the show, Jimmy.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Love your show.
Well, mate, we love yours too. We do have to make mention that you've got your own podcast as well. So how's that going for you?
Yeah, mate, that's been going well. I've been doing that for a couple of years now since my hip surgery, which ended my career. Decided to give the podcast a go, and it's been going really well. Managed to get heaps of really good guests on who've been pretty open and sharing their stories or whatever they wanted to share. So I'm very grateful to be able to be in that position, and it's been going well. It's obviously hard to juggle when you're coaching as well. So throughout the Tasman season, I wasn't able to get too many out there, but I guess now that that's finished, I can start trying to ramp that up a little bit again.
Well, it's a real privilege for us to be able to interview one of the best interviewers of sports people in the country. Jimmy, your podcasts are fantastic, so we hope we get some questions to you that'll open you up to our listeners. So let's get on with it.
Okay, let's start with a chat about those early years with the Tasman Makos. You played 36 games over 3 seasons, 2008 to 2011, including 2 seasons with your brother Tom. So how were those early years at the Mako? And that was coached by KK.
Yeah, my first year was actually with Todd Blackadder and Bevan Caldwell. So it was my second year out of school. As soon as the Tasman Mako were formed, it instantly became my dream to represent the Tasman Mako, and to get there relatively quickly was sort of mind-blowing for me. Loved the opportunity to, rub shoulders with some of these guys you idolised. I was a ball boy through all the Nelson Bay's days, so I knew a lot of the guys. They were all legends to me, so to be able to get out there and play alongside them was, like I said, pretty mind-blowing. But I really enjoyed the early years. Obviously, that's sort of when the brand started. The following year, KK came in, Leon came in. They really changed the culture. It was awesome to have a couple of years alongside my brother as well. So he actually played second 5, and I was at 10 for a lot of those games. So that was a really cool experience to get out on the field with him at that level as well.
And you shared the goal-kicking duties amongst yourselves in various games, did you not?
Yeah, I think he ended up getting a record of most penalties in a game. It might have been
he did
9 or something against Barpenny. But I was always a reluctant goal kicker, to be honest. I'd kick if I needed to, if I was the best, but it wasn't often the case. So I'd be pretty quick to hand the duties over. And I think for a few weeks there, Tom took over, and he seemed to go really well. I don't think he really liked it either, so I think he was pretty quick to pass it on to.
The martial goal kicking was not a strong suit. Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, we used to love it at practice, but once the pressure came on, both of us weren't huge fans or hugely accurate.
Did you have much of an influence from KK, or was it more Leon McDonald?
Oh, KK was massive for me, to be honest. He was, he's such an interesting character who's got such a great rugby brain, and obviously me being so young, I learnt so much off both of them, to be fair. I remember KK sitting me down after my first year, and my biggest work on was, I remember him sitting me down and saying, you just lack empathy. And like, it took me probably a few months to work out what he actually meant by lack empathy and why that was a work on for me in my rugby. But it was obviously just, I ended up sitting down with Goody and sort of asking him about it, and it came down to the point where I just would play, because I always wanted to play. I just couldn't quite balance the game right, and I always wanted to attack and play, or always looking for space, whereas sometimes the forward needed for the game to be slowed down or things like that. So that was a massive learning for me at such an early age to hear that from him, even though I didn't know what it meant. It's something that stuck with me throughout my whole career around it's not just about how you're feeling, it's about how the whole team's feeling. So little priceless pieces of advice like that from KK were massive for me.
2011, you played 2 games for the New Zealand Sevens. How was that experience?
Yeah, that was pretty crazy as well. Obviously, the trainings were super intense, and it was everything it got made out to be, working under Titch at the time. They gave me the opportunity, and then I had a phone call from Mark Hammett at the Hurricanes around the same time. So I had a decision to make, whether to chase the Sevens dream or give Super Rugby a crack. So I basically said to Gordon Titchens, if you contract me for the full year, I'll do Sevens, but he couldn't promise me that. So then I ended up going to the Hurricanes, and that's when I had to leave for Taranaki, because you had to be within the region at the time to be in the Hurricanes wider squad, you had to be within the region. So that's when Taranaki came
that
calling.
explains why you went there. So
Yeah.
that wouldn't be the case these days, of course, because we've got Noah Hotham, a Highlander, playing in Tasman, and other examples of that. So that rule's gone out the window.
Yeah, that rule pretty much got changed once I did it, because it was not how they wanted it to be, really. Like, they wanted players to be able to have opportunities, but without having to leave their province. So I guess I was a bit of a scapegoat, but that is why I had to leave the beloved Tasman Mako.
Okay, so that coincided with two heartbreak losses for us, the Tasman Mako, the 2012 Ranfurly Shield loss and the 2014 NPC final loss. And we got a photo of you holding the NPC trophy aloft in your yellow and black. It breaks my heart. But what was your reflection on those two occasions, playing against your home team?
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. I do remember that Ranfurly Shield one. I was on the bench, and I remember the Hammerheads. There was a big group of Hammerheads coming who flew up to the game, and man, they were into me on the sideline as I was warming up, calling me all sorts between the sons. So, yeah, I remember that, and I didn't get a huge amount of time, so it wasn't me who had any influence on that score. I think Bowden Barrett scored about 30 or something points and had a field day out there. So that was one of those games I'll always remember. It was such an entertaining game, even for the neutral rugby fan. Lots of points.
49-40 was the scoreline.
Yeah, it was a crazy game, but one I'll always remember. And that final, that was something special. That was probably one of my favourite games that I played in my career, to be fair. The crowd, everything about it, the week, the build-up, the fact that we were playing Tasman, I think, two sides. Obviously, Canterbury had dominated the NPC for a long time, so it was awesome to have two, smaller unions. What Tasman had done from the previous couple of years was pretty special to watch. Even though I wasn't there, I felt like me leaving probably helped them get to where they got to. But no, it was a special game. I remember so much banter out on that field. Obviously playing my brother and guys like Kieran Fonatier and Marty Banks, all these guys, Joe Wheeler. The intensity of that game, I think, got to all of us. We were all in the red for a fair amount of that game and giving it to each other. But very grateful to come out on the right side of the result that day.
Yeah, there were 21,000 people there that day, Jimmy,
Yeah.
and I think there were 500 of us in red. So you certainly had a massive home ground advantage. And that crowd was a reflection of the fact that it was a true provincial rivalry, going hammers and tongs at each other. So it was an amazing occasion. Did you get a chance to catch up with Tom and console him?
Yeah, Tom wasn't too happy after that game. I actually didn't get a chance to speak to him. He wouldn't talk to me for at least a couple of, I'm going to say it was probably a month, probably 4 weeks. He was still pretty fired up from that game. So, no, I never really got the chance till a lot later. But, yeah, he was filthy after that game and, yeah, didn't want to speak to me for a while.
Mate, you played 54 games for the Hurricanes, and that was including their 2016 title. So how did you enjoy your time at the Canes?
Yeah, I loved it up there. As a young kid, I was always a massive Hurricanes fan. And I was obsessed with Christian Cullen. So to be able to, sort of live my childhood dream of, being in the same jersey of Christian Cullen and running out there at Westpac Stadium. And I was so fortunate with some of the players I got to play with. Like, the back line everyone in the back line was All Blacks except for myself, and it was just such an awesome team to be involved in, and had a really good time. Obviously, we won the comp, or we lost the comp in 2015, which was pretty disappointing at the time, and then obviously the following year we got the opportunity to win it, which was an amazing feeling, and that was another one of those games for me, which I'll never forget.
And Mark Hammond had a big role in that. I understand he had to clean the club out a bit in the early years, and then got them to the point where they were competitive in 2015, and then a title in 2016, as you say.
Yeah, so I wasn't there before Mark Hammett, so I don't exactly know what the culture was like once he arrived. But I was part of that clean out, so I came into the wider squad that year, and a lot of guys had left, and it was a real young group, and all those guys were sort of nurtured really well over those next following years to become these world-class players. I remember it was the young TJ and Bodie and Brad Shields, all these young kids were the sort of core of the group that went on to win that Super Rugby title. So what they did in that clean-out year was probably pretty massive for the success that they had.
Stints followed in the UK with the London Irish and then in Japan. So is this where you started thinking about coaching?
To be honest, I always thought I was going to be a coach at some point, or it was always what I thought my calling was, to be fair. I always thought I was more of a coach than a player. Even when I was out on the field a lot of the time, it wasn't so much what I was doing with the ball, it was more off the ball and off the field where I felt like I was having my biggest influences on teams. So I always felt like I would coach, but then I got to the point where we'd travelled so much as a family and moved the family so many times that almost got to the point where I thought I wasn't going to coach because I didn't want to have to keep moving the family. So I did promise my wife that once I finished, I wouldn't get into coaching unless the coaching opportunity was where we decided to settle, which was initially Tasman, and that was fine. And then, an opportunity came out of nowhere, which almost was too hard to turn down. So it looks like we're doing that coaching. We're following that coaching dream.
You've been part of the coaching setup at Tasman for 2 or 3 seasons, making the final last year, but missing out on the playoffs this season. Is there anything you can pinpoint as being the difference between last season and this?
It's a tough one. I do feel like we did lose a huge amount of talent, and it might seem like a little bit of an excuse as a coach, but when you're taking the quality out of a group that you've got, you almost have to sort of rebuild the group a little bit, and I feel like we could have done that better, but I'm so excited around the future of the Tasman Mako group. Some of the young talent that have come through, it's easy to forget how young some of these guys are. You've got like your Mako Springer and Noah Houghton and Fletcher Anderson. All these kids are under 20 years old, which is crazy to think that the role that they're playing in our side at the moment and how big it is at such a young age. And they're going to learn. They would have learned a lot from this year around, game management and things like that, which is really hard to teach as a coach. I mean, I think Mitchell Hunt was a massive loss. He's a massive game driver for us and runs a lot of our stuff. But it was also an opportunity for like Willie Havili and Campbell Parata to get time in the saddle, and I guess they would have learnt a lot as well this year. And I felt like they all did a really good job, and there was a fair few games on reflection that we probably should have won. We were in positions to win, but we just missed a few opportunities. But I guess that's rugby, and like I said, I feel like the team's in a really good place going forward.
And now for you, heading off to join the Crusaders as an assistant coach under Scott Robertson, so that must be a big thrill.
Yeah, it is exciting. It was one of those ones at the start. Like, I wasn't sure how I was going to get this one past the wife. I genuinely thought I probably wasn't going to be able to accept it. I did turn down a role with the Hurricanes, was it 2 years earlier, but timing just wasn't quite right with another child on the way. So this time was a little bit better, but still took a fair amount of convincing to my wife to be keen to move down to Christchurch. We're pretty settled out here in Mapua, but she's come around now, and we'll be making the move at the end of this month.
Is she a Crusaders fan?
No.
She's not.
No,
that would have been a hard conversation then.
Yeah, she's not a fan of anyone really if the team have to move the family. So, but we're all excited. I've convinced the kids. They're excited about having races with Will Jordan and a few things like that. So, they're all excited to get down there.
And what's your specific role going to be, Jimmy?
So I'm going to be doing the backs down there. So obviously that aligns a little bit with our attack, who will be run by Scott Hansen, and a little bit around the D with Tamati Allison. So I'm obviously really excited to learn off those other coaches, Tamati and Scott and Razor, obviously, being what they've done down there the last, 6 or 7 years has been pretty incredible to watch from an outside in perspective, and looking forward to seeing what goes on the inside.
We touched on your podcast with What a Lad, which is a nice little side hustle you got going on, Jimmy. You're even selling merchandise and putting together racing certificates. But when did you get that germ of an idea to run a What a Lad podcast?
Yeah, so it was when I had my hip surgery. Wasn't quite. I knew my career was coming to an end, so I wasn't 100% sure what I was going to do. I knew coaching was one, but like I said, it wasn't really something I thought I was going to get into due to the moving and stuff. So I thought a podcast could be a really cool option to potentially go down, and I was just going to see how it went, give it a go, see how it went. And I was loving Artie Savier's podcast at the time, but I was always waiting for his next episode, and I was like, man, when's he going to do his next one? And then he sort of stopped, so gave me an opportunity to not jump in, but I guess get some of the guys that I thought had really cool stories on, and just go from there. And my first goal was to sort of do 7 episodes, because I knew the average podcast doesn't get past 7, so that was the first goal. And I think I'm at about 170 now, and loving doing them.
Yeah, well, one of the things, and I listen to you regularly, one of the things I think you've done is learned that lesson about empathy off KK very, very well, because you relate so well to all of the sporting people that you talk to. So that's a big rap for you. I just like your manner and the empathy that you show towards people, and you really do draw the very best out of them. So I'm going to try and ask you a couple of questions here. So who are the biggest crack-ups you've interviewed?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's always tough to compare. Like, everyone's so different. So when I try and compare, like, people always ask me, like, who's the best one? And I feel like everyone's good in their own right, or depending. I know it's sort of a cop-out answer, but I think a couple of the ones who I really got off, and man, my cheeks were sore from laughing, were some of the real entertainers who are like the Angus Ta'avals, Ngātoa Akoi. These guys are just so happy to express themselves, get up and dance, even though it's a podcast, or try and sing a song, and just real characters of the game. They're a couple that jump into my mind.
Yeah, and then there's that young fella from Tasman, Luca Inch. He made you laugh?
Yeah, Luca Inch, he had a fair few stories. He is a character as well. So, yeah, he'd be right up there with one of the funniest too, I think.
All right, and then who surprised you the most as to how entertaining they were? Like, you started the conversation, you're thinking this might not be all that entertaining, and then you just got blown away by their personality.
Yeah, that's a tough one too. Ngātoa was one where I wasn't quite sure what I was going to get out of him, but he was definitely entertaining in terms of performing. Guys who had really cool stories, which sort of blew me away, were like earlier days was Robbie Flynn, obviously Tasman lad who I played a little bit with earlier on, but I was blown away with sort of his upbringing and what he'd been through, and how he sort of blew his opportunity to become a professional rugby player. Guys like him really stand out. Even someone like a Mark Stafford, who had a pretty incredible journey to become the face of the TAB. He was one where I wasn't quite sure what I was going to get out of that one, but man, really blew me away with his story and some of the insight that he had in behind the scenes of the game.
One of the ones that I listened to, I thought this might be a little bit awkward, because he's a quiet lad around the team, and that was Pari Parkinson. He surprised me about how lucid and erudite he was in his conversation with you. He had a lot of yarns.
Yeah, he did. Like, I was the same with him, to be fair. Like, wasn't sure if he was going to give me much, but mate, he was very open and willing to share all sorts of stories, which I actually thought might have got him in trouble for a bit, but I'm glad they didn't.
I'm glad they didn't either. So, mate, what's the next step in the evolution of What a Lad?
Yeah, well, it's a hard one now with the Crusaders gig coming up. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to look next year, but I'm going to try and finish season 3 strong while I've got a little bit of time, and then I think during Super Rugby season, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do many, if any, and then obviously I'll only be full-time coaching for sort of half the year, or just for that Super Rugby season, and then that back end of the season where I'll have a bit more time. I'll be looking to almost double down on it then, and see where it ends up.
Yeah, well, it's a great little brand you've created, so it'd be awesome to continue it. It's highly entertaining, mate. Love listening to them.
Appreciate it,
mate. Lastly, going back to the Mako, you know that environment and the values very well. So, what do you think needs to happen for next season?
Yeah, good question. We've had a big chat around that as coaching groups and players and leadership group over the last couple of days to see what we could do better, and we found a few things, but ultimately I think, like what I mentioned before around the playing group, getting an opportunity, such a young group, getting an opportunity at this level, you can't beat time on the saddle, and I remember that in my earlier years at Tasman. It takes a while to get your head around how the game's played and decision making and things like that, so I feel like it's been a priceless year in terms of growth. And I even think back to like the Hurricanes years when we've got that new group of the Bodie, TJ, and the likes. It takes a couple of years to get where you want or get back to where you want to be, but I feel like we're definitely in a really good space to go forward and be a much better team next year. So I'm excited around the future. Some of these guys are coming through, and even through Nelson College. So I've been working up at Nelson College for the last couple of years, and some of the talent coming through there, the rugby program up there run by John O'Phillips is pretty special. So I think the talent coming through and to feeding the Tasman Mako is really exciting, and I think the future is going to be massive.
And I've just got one more question. Your father Ray took over my job at Radio 5-Shire a long time ago. So what's Ray up to these days?
Ray is officially retired. So
Is he?
Just turned, 65 or whatever it is, and he's living the life at the moment, doing a bit of travel and not too much, bit of work around the house and all the good stuff that comes with retirement. So he's loving it.
Oh, great stuff. Well, please pass on my best wishes.
Will do.
Thank you. All right, that's it. Thank you very much, Jimmy. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and great to look back at the Mako years and, of course, your Super Rugby career. And now, what a career ahead of you. And you never know, we might see you at the saddle back at the Mako.
Yeah. You never know.
Hopefully one day. But appreciate it, guys. Love your interviewing skills. Very impressive.
Oh, thank you, mate.
It's good to get a pass from you,
I think you said the average was 7 episodes, so we've jumped the hurdle. So
done it.
Good stuff. Thank you very much for spending time with us, and wish you all the best, and hope to speak to you again in the not too distant future.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, guys.
Thumbs up, Jimmy.
There you go. That's Mako assistant coach Jimmy Marshall, and great to talk to him and get some insight. And he's got a very exciting future ahead of him, I think, isn't he?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. He is a very, very he's extroverted. I think it's fair to say that he is. At least he's always smiling, always happy, and always able to relate to his players. Interesting word, isn't it, empathy? Because he's got it in spades, and it's kind of cool that it was KK who suggested to him, you need to think about this, and he did. And
interesting way to term it, isn't it? Because I understand what he's saying, because Jimmy, when he played 100 miles per hour. I mean, we used to play touch against the rugby boys, and Jimmy would just be burning everyone off left, right and centre. And so, perhaps most people would have said, well, you need to slow down a bit. But that's an interesting way of saying, isn't it? Empathy, meaning have a think about the play, have a think about the other players and what you're trying to set up for them. And it's not unlike touch, because sometimes you can burn from side to side. But if you're not setting up the play for the other players, a lot of it's a waste of time.
Yeah, and if you're held a skelter, you can burn out your forward pack. So,
yes, that's true.
So
that's right.
You know, I would suggest that KK was also saying, just think about them as well, son.
yeah, that's right. We want them to last 80 minutes at least. All right, but great to have him on board. And don't forget his podcast, What a Lad. So, Jimmy Marshall. You're with the Mako Rugby Roundup, and All Blacks, well, pretty much the season has come to an end, apart from the Northern Tour coming up, which we're going to be very excited about. But big news for our region, Les.
The All Blacks are coming to town.
Yes.
So next week, the management are arriving on Monday to Nelson, and on Tuesday the players come in various flights, and they're going to have a 3-day camp, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with the players, preparing for the Northern Tour. So, you know, it'll be a bunch of team meetings, training, gym work, but most exciting for the fans of the All Blacks in our region, they're going to have an open training on Thursday from 8:30 to 10 a.m. at Trafalgar Park.
Right.
And, you know, we're working with the good people from New Zealand Rugby right now, putting the X's and Y's together to make sure that runs smoothly. But it's going to be entry through the Mako gate, Chris. That's the gate closest to the river.
Right.
On that concourse, there'll be food carts, coffee carts. Seating will only be in the west stand, so the east stand will be closed off. But the good news is the sun rises. And
yeah, that's right.
So it'll be nice and warm at 8:30 a.m. And but they're going to be there for doing a training run, and then of course they'll meet the kids and the fams and selfies, autographs, that sort of thing. We'll carry on. We'll also do some interviews from the field with some players. So really looking forward to catching up with someone like David Havili or Finlay Christie. You know, we've got 7 of our guys in that team, so it'll be awesome to have a chat with them. So I really hope there's a big crowd there. It's certainly wonderful to have this happening in school holidays.
Yeah, and interesting they've chosen Nelson, but why wouldn't they? It's a beautiful park and nice location, close to the shops, and you might see a few All Blacks wandering around town.
Oh, well, see, they came in 2018 for that test against Argentina, and the review said they thought Nelson was fabulous because, you know, you can stay at the Rutherford Hotel, you can walk to Trafalgar Park, in the township. If they were having a coffee, they basically got left alone until they were walking, and then people are most welcome to come and have a chat to them. And they did like the playing surface. You know, Trafalgar Park is in great nick, and it's the perfect park to prepare on because you're not going to roll any ankles or things like that. So it's just wonderful that they've decided to come here, and thanks to Nelson City Council and, you know, my mates at Tasman Rugby Union, it'll be a really cool morning. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, that's it. That's a wrap. Thanks very much once again, Les. There's still plenty to talk about. We are going to have a bit of a chat next week with a wrap-up of the season, and then we'll have a bit of a break for the season, end of season 1.
Isn't that wonderful? 18 episodes it'll be.
Yeah, that's right. And then I think Jimmy's on 3, isn't he? So we've got a bit of catching up to do. But
yes, our first season, it's been a pleasure actually. Let's finish all that up next week. Yeah,
sounds good. All right, my thanks to Jimmy Marshall for joining us, and of course the mighty Les Edwards. You can hear this podcast on talknelson.co.nz and on our Facebook page and on Fresh FM 9 o'clock Friday night. So we'll speak to you again next week on the Mako Rugby Roundup. Have a great weekend.
The Mako Rugby Roundup. News, sport, events and more. It's the Talk of Nelson. Talk Nelson Radio.